Hi, guys, and welcome to episode 6 of Mental Mix. In today's episode, I'm going to be jumping into the topic of boundaries. What are boundaries and how we can apply them to different types of relationships in our life, whether that's friendships, relationships like dating, or families. This is going to be a little bit of a longer episode than usual, but I think that it's an important topic because especially in your teen years, but also in the rest of your life, it's important to establish boundaries so that we're determining what we are and aren't comfortable with in our relationships and we're getting the most fruits from our labor. Now, first, I would just want to define what a boundary is because in the past, I didn't really know what a boundary was. I kind of thought of the word boundary as the literal meaning, like boundary, limit, kind of like rules, like something has to stay in a certain guidelines. Like that's what I thought of the word boundary. But then I realized that a boundary was kind of what you set in a relationship and say, this is what I am and I'm not comfortable with, so that your relationships can be the most comfortable and kind with the person that you're exchanging things with. A healthy boundary can be anything super small to anything really, really large. So, for example, a large boundary would just say, I don't like when you touch me. I don't like being touched. I feel uncomfortable when people touch me. That's like a big thing. I don't have that boundary, but I'm just saying that it's an example. Like some people don't feel comfortable being touched, whether that's from trauma, whether that's just a personal choice, whatever it is. Some people just don't like being touched. Now, a smaller thing could be, I don't like when you speak to me in this way or make these certain comments about these certain things. That really bothers me just because. And honestly, when you set a boundary with someone, you don't have to give any reason why. That's one essential thing about boundaries, is that you don't have to give a reason why. And if somebody says, oh, why can't I do that? Like, why does that bother you so much? Why does it bother you that bothers me? You know, we don't have to give reasons for boundaries in order to have healthy relationships. You just have to know what does and doesn't bother you. So in friendships, for example, and I'm going to start off with that one because I think that friendships are the very clear-cut and main example of using boundaries, but they're also very important in relationships and in family. So I'm going to go into that later. But first, friendships. In friendships, we benefit from setting boundaries because we get to be more well understood by our friends, and overall just improves the health of the friendship. You improve the relationship between you and your friend, and you decrease the stress and the chance of hurting each other because you're not aware of what triggers one person or the other. You respect your friend, and the friend inherently respects you because you guys both know what you want to benefit from in the relationship. And you guys both get to have your own autonomy while both benefiting each other, because in the end, a friendship isn't just for yourself. You know, you're not just in a friendship because you want to reap in the benefits for yourself, but you get to help your friend by knowing, this bothers my friend. I'm going to try my best to do the opposite, and I'm going to try my best to help my friend to get over their fear of said thing. But also, your friend should be thinking at the same time, what can I do to help Mavi? What can I do to help you, the person that's listening? You know, what can I do to make sure that I'm respecting them while also doing whatever it takes to make them happier, you know? I know that it's a big fear, at least of mine. It was of mine, but I know that people can probably relate to this, that in the past I thought, if I share my boundaries with this friend, maybe they'll think I'm annoying. Maybe they'll think that it's just too much of a hassle, you know? Why does this girl have all these demands that I need to meet? Why do I need to do this, you know? But honestly, if you're in a friendship with somebody and you tell them your boundaries and they're not willing to meet them, that's not the kind of person you want to be friends with. Additionally, if you're friends with somebody and you tell them your boundary, you don't need to explain why you have that boundary. If you don't like being touched, for example, just even a hug or a tap on the shoulder or whatever, and they ask you, oh my gosh, why? Like, you're such a baby. You have no reason, you have no obligation to explain why you don't want to be touched, why you don't like being tapped. If you don't like that, that's cool. Whatever. But an essential thing about boundaries is that they're yours. You have, no one has the right to ask you why you are the way you are. And that's something I love about being a human, is that you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. And that very much applies to boundaries. So in friendships, it's essential that even if we think it's annoying, we need to set our privacy boundaries, set our boundaries on our expectations from the friendship, from how we want people to speak to us in the friendship, and like what I just said, like if you do or don't like being touched. Personally, I don't mind at all. Obviously, I don't want my friend to punch me in the face, but if my friend taps me or like hits me on the shoulder, like I don't mind. One thing that's essential to me in friendship-based relationships is that unless you're a very close friend of mine that I've known for a while or somebody that I'm just close to, I don't really like sharing private things. Now, obviously, this is my podcast, I share some of my private stories, but if I just met somebody, an unspoken kind of boundary is I don't really like sharing private things. And if somebody shares something really private to me, I'll listen. I won't judge, obviously. But I don't want them to expect me to just reciprocate that same kind of just openness. I am a person that it takes a while to crack me open. I don't really like opening like that because you see what I'm doing? I'm explaining why I have my boundary, which I don't need to do, so I'm not going to explain it. Anyways, on to the next. The next kind of boundary I want to talk about is in dating and in romantic relationships. It's super, super quintessential that in relationships we set boundaries. This one I would say it's a little bit more obvious than in friendships, because in friendships, like, we don't really realize the need for boundaries because we don't think it's that serious, But definitely in relationships, of course, we can see that boundaries are important because in relationships, we want to make sure that both of the partners' needs are being met. Now, I'm a firm believer that relationships shouldn't be 50-50. They should be 100-100. I think that you should be giving your most to make sure that you're putting your 100% into a relationship. Now, this can mean that some days you don't feel as energetic, you feel drained, and you say, hey, look, I feel exhausted today. I'm not going to be able to give you the attention that you need. But making sure that the next day we're going and we're giving our partner attention, we're doing the most to make sure that they're okay, that their needs are being met, and that's it. That's how simple it really is. Also, boundaries in relationships can help us to maintain our independence while also working together. So it helps you gain a positive relationship with the person, a healthy, positive relationship, and you guys can communicate better. You can make sure that you're being efficient with your time when you're not together. And you also set goals in your relationship by creating boundaries. So maybe in a relationship, let's say that a boundary of mine is that I want to set aside time for studying because I'm in school. And your partner says, okay, you can set aside this much time in the week to go study. But a boundary of mine is that I don't want your studying time to cut into our date time. And you say, okay, that's fine. We can separate these and find time for each thing. And that's it. See how that simple communication just elevated your relationship and just improved the transparency between both of you. You can have boundaries about financial things when you're with somebody. So, I don't want to spend this money. I don't want to borrow this. Just saying no in general is very powerful. Sometimes we're afraid to say no to things because we think that we're being rude, or we're just not doing as much as we could to make people feel accepted. But sometimes we kind of need to make people feel unaccepted in order to benefit ourselves. And I'm not encouraging you guys to be selfish. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that it's okay to be a little bit selfish at times, in the sense that we can't always be trying to please others. That's a big point in this episode, is that we need to stop being pushovers, okay? All right, guys? Please, just, if you take one thing, take that. Another type of boundary we can make in relationships are physical boundaries. So, like I said before with the friendships, kind of the same thing. The same idea that if somebody hugs you and you don't like it in a certain way, say, please don't hug me like that. You guys, you can probably interpret what other ways you could do that in relationships. You could also establish emotional boundaries. So if there's something that your partner is really adamant about talking about, and you say, I don't like talking about this when I'm overwhelmed because I feel like I'm going to be mad and I'm going to say something that I don't want to say and I can't take back. That's a super important thing in relationships, is being able to say, you know what? I need a break right now. I'm very stressed out right now, and if we have a discussion right now, I'm capable of saying things that might be hurtful and might not be what I would say if I was clear-headed. So just setting those emotional boundaries can elevate a relationship by making sure that you guys are communicating and not just yelling at each other and getting into unnecessary fights. Lastly, the other kind of boundaries that I want to talk about are families. Now, these are unique challenges because I feel like there's kind of a stigma, at least in the Latino community, because I am a Latina and I know that creating boundaries with Latino families can be a little bit difficult just because of the different culture. In Latino culture, it's interesting to see how generations have perceived mental health, and creating a boundary with your parents or even siblings, but mostly parents, in a Latin household is so, so different, I feel, from other cultures, because it's just seen as unnecessary and almost rude to tell your parents that you need space or need a boundary, at least in Latino households. But I'm going to try and keep this applicable to everyone. But in my experience, it's hard to set boundaries because it can be seen as annoying and it can be seen as disrespectful almost to say, Mom, it hurts my feelings when you do that, because, or Dad, it hurts my feelings when you do that, because your parents are going to say, well, I want what's best for you. I'm telling you this because it's what's best for you. And saying, well, can you say that in a different way? It's important that we be brave as children. We stand up to our parents. I'm kidding. But even if you're a parent talking to a child, or if you're a sibling talking to another sibling, it's important to be brave and courageous and say, this is hurting my feelings. This isn't okay for me. And even though it's the people that you've grown up with your whole life, obviously some of the things that they tell you are going to hurt your feelings. And since they're the people that have been with you your whole life, they're going to be with you for the rest of your life. So you might as well try to improve those relationships. And I know that with family, you might feel guilty or feel like you have an obligation to just put up with them. And although you do have to put up with them because they're your family, they also have to put up with you. So why not just tell them, hey, this hurts my feelings. This isn't okay. I don't like this. Please change this, And also being receptive when they tell you, hey, this is uncomfortable for me. This is not okay. And you say, okay, I'm sorry. I will improve. And hopefully they say the same thing when you tell them. Lastly, I know that, at least for me, it's been a struggle with boundaries because we need to have compassion for ourselves. One thing that I've struggled with is that I think that setting boundaries, I feel like I'm being annoying because I'm like, why should I have boundaries? I can just get over it. And there's a difference between being very sensitive and being too sensitive almost, then being sure in yourself, but also not letting people unnecessarily harass you with bad comments or just belittle you, you know? So we need to make sure that we're setting those boundaries and being confident in ourselves by knowing setting a boundary isn't being weak. In fact, you're being strong and you're being brave by setting a boundary. What I want you guys to take from this episode is to think about all the different kinds of relationships that you guys have in your life, the friendships, the romantic relationships, if you do have one, the family relationships, and think about how you can apply different things that have been bothering you to create boundaries in these relationships. Also, another thing I'm going to call you guys to do is to try to be more receptive of people when they make those boundaries clear to you, because they're already very brave by telling you what it is that's bothering them. So just hear them out and say, you know what? I'm sorry for what I did. And I promise to improve on this in the future and actually go through with it. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. I do have some guests coming soon on some new episodes, so stay tuned for those. And yeah, let me know on my Instagram, Mental Mix Podcast, if you guys have any ideas for any episodes or anything you guys would like to hear me talk about. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you next Thursday. Bye.